already from Pak Anwar and then Pak Sauki and the others participants in the back. Please, Pak Anwar.
Thank you. First of all, should congratulate Rose and Iwan for the excellent paper. My point is that I think that they should also a little bit discuss what are the response of the government to this book. And then particularly for Rose, I think it's a good you do the comparative study between Indonesia and Australia. Why don't you also do the between SBY and Suharto? That's why you say the time is different, as Parada said. Yeah? During SBY, we have a lost generation because of the bad economic policies. Yeah? Bad economic policy in the exchange rate, in fiscal policy, and also in the regulation. Rather than they talk about banking reform. Before the crisis, I was summoned by Sadli to have half the seminar at the IMF. And he asked me about Indonesian problem. I said, Stan, in my judgment, the core of the problem, the epicenter of the crisis, there are two things. One, we have a very weak banking system. And then we have a very big foreign borrowing of corporate sector. Of course, with the regulator, don't worry about fiscal issue. Because our budget policy, all of the budget deficit financed by foreign creditors. So at the time we have a relative balanced budget. And then the current deficit is only 3 to 4% of GDP. It's less than half of that what you said in your textbook. Should be critical. Yeah, in the textbook macroeconomy, you have by the current deficit over 70%. You have to be more critical. That's what I said to you. Our banking system is very bad, lack of capital, and then the rules and the regulation was rotten. You don't pay attention to risk, because that the 30 years of Suharto era repressed the banking system. Yeah? So this is very important. And then also, as you mentioned in your paper, but I think you have to dig more deeper on the Dutch disease. Yeah, this is what we are going to restore for era. Yeah, when Pak Sadli was the Minister of Mines. Yeah, these are the Pak Sadli, Ali Wardana, Wijoyo, my judge was the hero of Indonesia. Yeah, how they stopped the inflation, how they managed the Dutch disease, how they reformed the tax system. Yeah, there is no such people under SBY like Raden Pardere. He did nothing. SBY, and then he went this exploitation of unsuccessful material to force the miners to establish the smelter, but no electricity. No big hard work. How can you do that? Yeah. So this is again the problem. You know that comparison between Indonesia during the oil boom and the primary boom, I think is more very good. And for the future, also, I think that this government needs to advise, because you're ambassador to China, and now also you are the director of a center of Chinese issue in EU. The future of the Indonesia, I think, is not very bright. Yeah. simply because this government, unlike Deng Xiaoping is the student of Arthur Lewis. He used the surplus level to improve the productivity. In our SBY administration, we expect that the unskilled, uneducated level or overworked, including your household, to become maid in your house. Yeah? Because there is no job opportunity at home. That's what that's totally different from Deng Xiaoping. Yeah? And then this government never used this state-owned enterprises engine of growth, like Singapore. Yeah? So they still misuse this state-owned enterprise. So this is my point. Thank you.
This is just a comment, and first of all, I would like to congratulate Ross for your excellent paper. I suppose for Indonesia, we are blessed or cursed, depending on how you see it, with natural resources, and natural resources is always going to be part of the economy in the past, and I think in the distant future also. So because of that, the economy is going to be always sensitive to the boom and bust of the mineral and oil sector. I think how the government respond to this situation is more important and is very crucial on determining how the economy move to the future. I think Raden made a very excellent comparison between the time of the oil economy and now with the mineral. The difference, I think, is a very significant difference in how the government responds to the dynamics of the oil prices and the mineral prices now. I still remember, I was very young then, how the government reacted drastically, I think, to the decline in oil price at that time. I think everyone knows how the government basically changed the customs into private sector and then open the market to trade, open the transportation, maritime transportation to trade. All of these has a very significant impact on productivity. Technology transfer from trade played a very significant contribution to productivity increase in Indonesia during that time. Paiwan, I think, made a very good point about the declining productivity of the manufacturing sector. And that, I think, has to do with how the government in the last 15 years responded to the boom and bust of the mineral price. The approach now in the last 15 years has been the reverse to what it was then. The move is toward protectionist, and we lost as a result of that the advantage of technology transfer. Technology has changed so significantly in the last 15 years, and Indonesia has not tapped to that change in technology very effectively. We are still, in manufacturing sector, for example, we are still stuck to this what is that called, the industrial tree approach of industrial policy, whereas the world has changed. It's not, as Iwan had mentioned, comparative advantage in product. It's a comparative advantage in task that is determining your participation in trade. And as a result of that, I think if that does not change quickly in this 5-year change, the productivity is going to decline even more, and it will come a time when it becomes very difficult to reverse that. And I suppose this has to be to be emphasized, the policy response of the government to this boom and bust, the like of the mineral. Because mineral, I think, is going to be always part of the economy. Thank you.
Related to the today's discussions, which is about equitable growth, we know that many papers already stated and literature already stated that growth in manufacturing will be creating much more equality in terms of equality. And a recent paper from Professor Budi Reso Sudarmo, for example, from NU, found that growth in non-mining will create more equality compared to growth in mining sector, for example. So it shows how actually resources, natural resources exploitations or coming from natural resources is actually not creating as much equality compared to those coming from, let's say, manufacturing sectors, which give more additional value. So, as stated by Pak Nidib previously, stating that not until late 90s, so until from 80 until 90s, we still have growth in manufacturing sector, let's say 10 until 12%, right? And after that, our growth in manufacturing sector is only 4 to 6% from early 2000 up until now, which is very low. And some people say that even what's going on, is it the industrialization that happened or something like that? So I believe that, I don't know, probably the panelists can explain what is actually going on such that our manufacturing sector goes so down like that. Is there has been a structural changes such that it went very low, or is there any much more bigger issue towards that? Because what I see right now, government is currently focusing on how to create much more, increase much more competitiveness for Indonesia by supporting more capital spending on infrastructure such that our logistic costs will go down and our products can compete, something like that. So is it sufficient to promote manufacturing growth sector? Because we know that given that commodity boom is already over currently, and we're not really optimistic that it's going to be any commodity boom again in the near future. So definitely the government has to focus on non-resources sector, which is probably manufacturing sector. And does the government has done enough by pushing spending on infrastructure as well as creating one-stop services to give easiness to permits of investment in our country? So that's my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. For the another questions, Ibu.
Happy Kartini Day for all Indonesian. My name is Yus Brusma. I'm from a Indonesian Heritage Society. Basically, I'm here to scout for a lecture. But anyway, very a good topic. So I always believe that, and another comment. I'm probably one of the few that from non-academic. So I hope my question will represent from the table. So I always believe that once you satisfy your stomach, then you can go up to satisfy your mouth, and you can satisfy your brain, and in the end you will satisfy your soul. But the last level, I think only Dalai Lama will get to that. So in the news now, how we satisfy our mouth and stomach is taken for between those two. For instance, the government of Ahok and the DPR. So they're bickering among one another. So having said that, I was wondering if our end of the destination, Kemanglipang Lojinawi Toto Titip Tentrem, is still our destination, final destination of growth. I think we have to reassess that. So I was wondering if one of the key success success to tackle all our problem of growth now is go back again to the roots, which is decentralization. I know we have decentralization from 2000, but is it time now to optimize it, to accelerate it? For instance, like facilitate the economies, sound economies, into each region. So when we have a good, healthy region, we will have a good country. Thank you.
Pak Anwar, I think you've been a bit tough on SBY. His job was very hard. Very hard to make economic policy work in a democracy. Democracy is very good. Lots of value in a democracy that we all recognize, but it takes. It's quite a big challenge to make the democracy work, and I think, especially in that first SBY term, he showed that you could do reasonable economic policy in a democracy. Now, our job now is to help the new government go from reasonable to good economic policy, so rather than to criticize too much the early democratic governments and praise too much the easy job of economic policy in an authoritarian government. But on the detail of what you say, that is very sound and very important guidance for economic policy in the new circumstances. On Pat Saki's question on, well, really around the question of is natural resource wealth a curse or a blessing? Well, there's lots of evidence that unless you manage it very well, it is a curse. But that doesn't, even if you recognize that it can be a curse if you don't manage it well, that does not solve the problems. If you've got natural resources, then you will get developments in your economy that need need management. So I'd put all of the focus on making sure you have the management systems to make good use of your resources. And as I said in my earlier presentation, Indonesia in the past has shown that it can get value out of resources. It always could have done better, but it shows that you can use the resource wealth for more general development. But you need to have effective government to collect the resource rents and to use them for development. And I think that your cautions about the new nature of the division of labour does require some new thinking. I think that free trade, removing barriers to trade, is even more important with the new pattern of international trade than the old one. The new pattern of trade, where trade is not in final products but fragmented into components and parts of a process and tasks, I think that makes open trade even more important. And then Ibu from the Ministry of Finance asked, well, why is growth 4 to 6% for manufacturing during the resources boom when it was much higher in the 2 decades before that? Well, I think the high real exchange rate is a real problem. And we can't go back in history and rerun the policy decisions of the past, but if we save more, and this is even more important in Australia than Indonesia, but it's important in both our countries, if we save more in the boom, if governments run surpluses, maybe it needs a sovereign wealth fund to make that manageable. That money would be available now. We would not have had the big appreciation of the real exchange rate, which is the real reason, the appreciation of the real exchange rate, the loss of competitiveness. That's the reason why manufacturing growth was slowed down. Not the only reason, but it's the biggest one. We've got to get the real depreciation and also the supporting policies to promote competitiveness. So, yeah, you raised the question of infrastructure investment. That's crucial, and Anwar also made this point. What's the point of forcing processing of minerals if you don't have the electricity, the ports, the other infrastructure to do it. And the policies to focus on in promoting manufacturing and processing are more those enabling policies, I think. You're much more likely to get a good result if you provide that infrastructure than if you simply ban raw material exports. Now, I should mention that now is a very good time for Indonesia to make large investments in productivity-raising infrastructure. It's a time when the developed world and China have surpluses of savings over investment. One consequence of that is that real interest rates on international markets are the lowest in history. In real terms, they are about zero for low-risk investments. In fact, in Germany, even the nominal interest rate is negative up to 3 or 4 years. Of course, it's not easy for Indonesia simply to borrow on global markets for long-term investment in infrastructure, but it's important that the developed countries and China develop the institutions that facilitate the long-term lending for infrastructure, and then Indonesia can make good use of that. The G20 meeting in Indonesia and then followed up by the G20 meeting in Australia, both committed the developed countries to developing better institutions for long-term investments in infrastructure. And the new Chinese development on the China Infrastructure Investment Bank will facilitate that process. So it's turning out to be a good time if Indonesia can get its administrative act together to make big investments on infrastructure. And finally, Ibu, that last question about decentralization. My main questions there would be how do you make the decentralization work administratively? My observation is that it's been very hard to develop the administrative mechanisms to for government to be effective at the local level, and I would suggest that any further decentralization be planned alongside the improvement of infrastructure and coordination of central decentralized decision making that's necessary to make it work. Thank you.
Mari.
Just 3 brief points from me. For Masaoki on technological change, I just want to cite one example here. We have been ignoring the decline in the cost of solar technology for power generations and ignoring our potentials. Among the reasons why China can produce the photovoltaic equipment so cheaply is because they are importing sand quartz from us under the name of clay. That's another reason why they can produce it so cheaply. But what I'm saying is that we do ignore that opportunities. And then look at what Germany is doing. The country that doesn't have sun 3/4 of the year commit to reach 65% of their power comes from solar by 2025. And we are here wasting our resources. The second point about decentralizations, go back to the root. I'm a firm believer that decentralizations can work, but only if we have strong and consistent central government. This is where the battle takes place usually. Pemerintah pusat itu sering tidak ikhlas. Desentralisasi tidak ikhlas. Jadi silakan dipelajari berapa banyak lembaga desentralisasi tidak ikhlas di dalam setiap kementerian. Itu terminologi yang barangkali paling tepat ya, karena kemudian membuat sistem tidak berjalan. Kewenangan diserahkan kepada daerah, tetapi budget dipegang oleh perpanjangan tangan lembaga pusat di daerah. Akhirnya mereka cuma jadi calon. This is one of the problem that we have. Tapi juga tolong hati-hati betul kan pada masa-masa awal. Of course, I hope this is changing now. Tapi significantly within the first 7 to 8 years of decentralization, itu kan desentralisasi itu diartikan this is my turn. Unfortunately, this is my turn to make a mess. Benar kan? Lihat aja apa yang terjadi hampir di semua kabupaten di Republik ini. If you follow Kompas December edition every year, they can only qualify like 12 to 15 bupatis and wali kota setiap tahun. Yang benar gitu mikirnya. The rest what are they doing? And then 4 people become PhDs because of analyzing our satellite data showing that decentralization occurs right before and 2 years after the Pilkada. And that's observation over 580 elections. Gila kan? Tapi that's what decentralization in Indonesia takes place. And the last point from me is that on the reaction to the quiz, it is very interesting. When I asked, do you agree if the government doesn't care about for whom is the growth? Very little people agree on that statement. And then when I asked also at the end, whether government care for the subnational perspective, also very few people agree with that statement. But when I asked about the difference in GDP and GNP and GDP, everybody agrees. There's a very inconsistent view of ourselves, right? We, the economists, said we never talk about GDP and GNP differences, but we did not admit that we don't actually care for whom is the growth when we are planning the investment. So what are we saying? We are lying to ourselves. Yeah? So I'm serious here because that's why nobody cares about East Kalimantan when only 10% of the GDP stay in the province. If I'm a Dayak from East Kalimantan, there will be something. Luckily I'm not. But that's just one example. The suspicions are not uniform. The further you go east, the worse it is. So what are we saying? We are exploiting our other part of Indonesia for whom? Is the growth worth it? Ask yourself. Is that what we call development? Are we here to justify that kind of pattern? So I think this is something that we really need to rethink about our development approach here. And mind you, all those, I would say most of those infrastructure projects under the MP3I is very dangerous in the sense that the spirit is wrong. The infrastructure is planned to be developed not because we want to develop there. Look at the pattern. Nobody cares about the difference between GDP and GNP. But we want to develop infrastructure in the province because there are more to be extracted. Look into that situation. Look into that issue from your inner self. Because this is about values, not about technicalities of econometrics, not about data statistics. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Pak Mubarik. Now I give opportunity to Pak Raden Pardede.
Thank you. The main problem, as we discussed, is basically we are not rich. Our resources is limited. If we think we are rich, then there is a tendency of the policy, the government-led growth. And precisely, we already see in our budget this year, for example, as if we can do a lot, and it is by government. As a matter of fact, I think, for example, our tax revenue is way too ambitious, that we cannot achieve the target for sure. Then, if we think that we have a lot of money, then we will inject our state-owned enterprise to build the infrastructure. But toward the end, I think we will realize later on that our revenue is way, way too high to achieve. But it's become too late. I think instead of relying too much on the government, but this one is the shift of the paradigm, of course. Why don't facilitate the private sector? And this is very important, I think. Right now, we think that we can do a lot from the government side, but our resources is limited. The second one is related to what Nuraini mentioned, and also is very important. Of course, we'd like to build infrastructure. The numbers say, look at the numbers, our infrastructure spending, the central government spending on infrastructure is far below 2%. If you compare in 1980s to 1990s, the central government spending on infrastructure is much, much higher, 3 times to 4 times that much. So this is the main problem. It is true, now the government already emphasized to build the infrastructure, but not to build by themselves. They can afford it. Basically facilitate the private sector to do this. So the policy is already there for infrastructure, but the way, how do you finance this one? Who will do this one? And again, the implementation is the devil. We may have this one, but the implementation is far, far away. Land acquisition is one, the most difficult one that we face right now in the market. And a one-stop service, it is good. We have in the central government now one-stop service in FKP. But the problem is not in the central government. It is in the local government. We don't have one-stop service in the local government. And that's the main problem. All these licenses have to go to the central government. Of course, we'd like to see the decentralization working well. It is true. I agree with Pak Mubarak on this area. But if you just look at the numbers now, look at the APBN. We transfer significantly to the local government. Despite we may not achieve our revenue, but by formula, we will transfer significantly to the local government. But you know how much that they spend for infrastructure, for capital expenditure? It's very minimal. So again, we need to optimize the decentralizations, but I'd like to see this working well. And again, encourage FDI is more important than just the capital flows to the country. Based on our calculations, if we really need to grow faster and to create jobs significantly, we need 3 times that we have right now in FDI. I need to enter the production network. It is true, like Pak Iwan said about this. We continue to think that we can produce everything by ourselves. There's a tendency right now. So, the overall the policy direction is there, but you have to look at how you implement it. Of course, one-stop policy in the central government is already there, but the problem is not in the central government, it is in the local government. The transfer to the regions, I think we need to optimize that one, and more importantly, we don't know exactly what is the KPI for this. The KPI on the regional government still very in the gray area right now. So if you want to transfer to the local government, yes, it is true. We need to encourage, we need to optimize that, but with clear KPI. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak JJ, for the response. I think time is already over. I know the participants want to ask more questions, but I think after these sessions, you can ask directly to the Professor Ross or Pak Iwan Jayasis, Pak Mubarak, and also Pak Raden Pak Dede. On behalf of LPEM and Indonesia Projects, I would like to thanks for your participations for today's study lectures. We have great and fruitful discussions, and I would like to say see you next year Sadli lecture. Thank you.